Oh, hello, Internet. Welcome to another edition of Ride or Die movie review. Movie review edition. There you go. So today we're going to be talking about the recently released George Miller directed, written, developed Furiosa, a Mad Max tale? Is that what it's called? A Mad Max saga? I guess it should be really technically called A Tale from the Wasteland. Now we can put all of the Mad Max movies, we can give them obnoxious like subtitles or subheadings. The Wasteland Stories. The Road Warrior. Do shit like that. We're going to retcon all this stuff. We're going to make everything old new again. Oh boy. So if you've been watching the channel, or if you've watched any of our reviews, we talked a lot about Furiosa, or what our expectations for Furiosa would be when we reviewed Mad Max Fury Road. And then Jeremy and I, my adopted son, Jeremy, we watched the trailer for Furiosa. We discussed what we were thinking, what we were anticipating. How did we feel about the movie? How did we feel about the movie itself? I was very cautiously optimistic. That's kind of where I ended up. I was like, I'm going to have some cautious optimism here. I really like George Miller. I feel like I can trust him to at least deliver something that'll be passively entertaining. At the very least, right? At the very least, there's going to be some fun characters and a few good set pieces, even if the story doesn't make any sense and doesn't hold together very well or whatever. Because my big contention with Furiosa in general is that it's a Furiosa movie. Not because it's a female protagonist. Not getting into all that bullshit. But just because I thought we had kind of seen the culmination of her story. We saw the end of her story. We saw the most important part of her journey, essentially. And there wasn't really much of a reason, a real impetus to go back. Because I felt like it would be kind of redundant. I feel like that character, what are you going to do? Have the same character arc again? And the answer is kind of. We'll get into it. So, general impressions. It was way, way better than I had anticipated it being. George Miller, I feel like that cautious optimism was pretty well placed. If George Miller can do anything, it's that he can put together an entertaining yarn. But it still suffers from what I was talking about, kind of the prequelitis problem. The problem is that you already know what happens to the character. It really lowers the stakes when you're watching things like this, because there's really no sense of danger. Because if you populate the movie with characters from Fury Road, which it kind of does, a lot of characters make cameos. If you do that, then you're kind of taking away our ability to feel any sense of tension about what's going to be happening to any of them. So they obviously they have a new cast of characters to be dispatched of in this movie, led up by Chris Hemsworth as Dementus, who was much better than I had anticipated. I actually think that the Furiosa trailer doesn't actually represent the movie very well, because they're kind of leaning into this this kind of notion of, hey, you remember the Road Warrior, don't you? Well, here's a trailer and here's some music cues from the Road Warrior, and it's cut like the Road Warrior trailer. It's not like that at all, actually. It's much more of its own thing, which is what I actually kind of walk away the most appreciative of, is that the movie truly was its own thing. It's not even that set piece heavy. It was really way more about the characters in the world of the Wasteland than I had anticipated. Unfortunately, Furiosa bombed at the box office, as everybody knows. So everybody's been talking about nonstop, because this does feel like a prologue to a much bigger thing. Or it's like a piece of a much bigger thing. He used Furiosa and the story of Furiosa to kind of introduce you to the larger world. He does a lot of world building. He does a lot of kind of setting up. A lot of winking and nodding towards things that exist in this world. And that is when the movie really works really well. That's when the movie sings. It's when it's completely doing its own thing and kind of just having fun with some of the characters. But like I said, Chris Hemsworth, very pleasantly surprised by Chris Hemsworth's performance. I saw the trailer, and it was like a little campy, and it was a little much. It was like a little too much. There was something about it that just was off to me. But I think that was because I was thinking of Fury Road. And that's not fair to Furiosa at the end of the day. You kind of have to accept Furiosa for what Furiosa is going to be. It's a very different thing. It was much more character-driven, much more world-building than I expected. It's got a lot more CGI. Like from a technical perspective, there's a lot more computer trickery, way less practical effects. And you will notice. It's noticeable. Especially because I just watched Fury Road and just had a great 2-hour conversation with my boys, Jeremy and Dan Prophet. So, you're more apt to kind of draw direct comparisons because I've just watched it. But even then, you'll notice because some of it looks kind of bad. It's like stylized. I'll say that. It's stylized. Stylized in a way where you can decide for yourself whether you think it's good or bad. I think it's kind of one of those things where it's like, is the dress blue or is the dress purple or whatever the fuck? What was it? The dress gold or blue? Remember that thing? We all see what we're going to want to see out of that a little bit. Out of the special effects, CGI production design, you're going to either be able to accept it or not. Because in a lot of ways, some of it feels like an aesthetic choice for sure. Other times it feels like it's just bad green screen. I'll be real. It really kind of does. But that's when the movie's kind of working on its, when it's doing its own thing, that's when it's at its best. And there's so many fun characters and fun moments. Anya Taylor-Joy is pretty good as Furiosa. I mean, she doesn't have a ton to do, honestly, surprisingly enough. Her performance becomes very cringe anytime they try to basically be like, look, she looks like Charlize Theron now. Didn't you hear her talk? She's talking like Charlize Theron in the movie. Your favorite movie, Internet, Fury Road. Doesn't that fucking get you hard, boy? Aren't you ready to come? That bitch looks like Charlize Theron. But anyways, Anya Taylor-Joy for me is just like, she's such an alluring creature. I become like a boomer coomer immediately. And I would probably leave my family for Anya Taylor-Joy, even just for a fling, you know? I'll be like, sorry, guys. I mean, if it's for a fling, though, I feel like my sons would understand, you know? At some point, we'd be able to talk about it, like, sorry for that 2 years, guys. Shit was just, it's Anya Taylor-Joy, dude. Like, what do you want me to do? They'd be like, yeah, I get it. I get it, Dad. Hell, my wife would probably even get it. She would be like, you know, it is Anya Taylor-Joy. She's a good actress. She's an incredibly attractive person. I was talking to somebody the other day, and when I think about why Anya Taylor-Joy is so, like, kind of mysterious, there's something about her. She has an aura about her. And I think it's because she has, like, the facial characteristics and kind of the build of, like, a Disney character, of, like, a Disney princess, but she's a real person. So your brain starts, like, trying to reconcile this fact. And it has a hard time, so you just go like, ooh, she's kind of spooky, and I kind of like that. It reminds me of back in the day, somebody else who had the same kind of quality is Julia Roberts. You know, I'm not saying they look alike. What I'm saying is they have the same kind of sense about them back when they were younger, or at least she did back when she was younger, because her eyes are big, her lips are kind of almost like cartoonishly big. She's got that big grin, that smile. There's just something about her. It just seems a little supernatural. And she's a good Furiosa. I enjoyed her as Furiosa for what she had to do. Chris Hemsworth probably steals the movie by and large, really. Because, you know, and this is a little bit of a spoiler, but like I want to just kind of drive home that it really is its own thing, is that the movie even ends. It doesn't end on like a big car chase or a fight. It ends with like this extended conversation between Dementis and Furiosa as he kind of loses to her in like some kind of fight. And they end up in this kind of abstract sand smoke area. And they just have a nice long chat in which then, you know, Furiosa dispatches her justice. One thing that was a little cringe was that it does that thing where it bridged right up against Fury Road. So, like, the last little bit of the movie is literally what you're supposed to imagine was happening during Fury Road that you didn't get to see. So all the stuff while Tom Hardy's getting his tattoos and getting his head shaved and trying to escape, well, that all happens while Furiosa is getting the girls together and loading them into the rig. It was a little silly. I didn't think we really needed that, honestly. I think it does a good job though with the world building, like kind of the bureaucracy of the wasteland was actually very entertaining. I was really into that stuff, way more than I expected to be, and it kind of, and maybe this is kind of cliche to say, it kind of made me wish that it was a TV show, because I feel like there's actually a lot of stuff to explore in the wasteland with these characters and even these actors. So another thing I really loved about this one was that it kind of reclaimed some of its Australian roots. They got away from that a little bit with Fury Road, with the casting. And this one, though, thankfully, we're kind of back to any kind of second string character is going to be filled in with a Australian character actor. And I just think it gives those movies a texture. Like, I kind of like that they're Australian movies, like specifically Australian, you know, culturally, socially, they kind of just have their own feel, their own vibe, especially those first three, right? So, you know, coming back to this, it was nice to see that he kind of reincorporated that stuff, because I do think he kind of got away from that during Fury Road, and it felt more just like, much more like a Western, like kind of a generic American movie, for lack of a better way to put it. And even saying generic's not fair, but it lost a little something. It lost a little something in the sauce, you know? But yeah, it's pleasantly surprised. Very pleasantly surprised. I had a great time watching it. I don't know if it'll hold up to repeat viewings or anything. You know, I really don't. But I can say, while the experience of watching it was a good time. It was a good time. And I was not expecting that. Like, I kind of went in the movie to kind of hate it a little bit. I thought I was going to be dogging on it a lot more than I am. What's the bad? It's maybe a little too long. I think you could make the argument that it's a little too long. There is some redundancies in the film. I do think it struggles with the idea that Furiosa just isn't that interesting of a character. I don't get it. I don't really understand what George sees in that character that we haven't already seen. Like, he did a great job with Furiosa and Fury Road. You know, going through this journey and kind of just learning things we already know. Wasn't that great. It didn't draw you in. So thankfully, like, Dementis in the world actually ends up being kind of the co-character. It's kind of like the co-lead of the movie is large, in a kind of a broad sense, just the wasteland characters. They all kind of come together with the head of the beast kind of being Dementis. The guy who played Immortan Joe was pretty good. Immortan Joe's in the movie quite a bit, actually. But he just doesn't have much to do. He just kind of stands there and looks menacing while people talk around him. And then he says, "We're not going to do that," or "Come this way," as Immortan Joe is one to do. But yeah, and there was some interesting kind of stuff going on in terms of the culture and the society, like especially when Furiosa is a little girl. You kind of get some insights into how the wasteland operates when it comes to its population, or how people are viewed. You know, Immortan Joe, you know, it was funny, I was kind of I think I was joking about this during our review, but I was like, Immortan Joe's actually like a liberator. Like, if Furiosa is about to get a rude awakening about what it's like to, like, lead a people anywhere. Oh, you're gonna ration food? Oh, is nobody gonna like you when you have to ration the fucking water lady? But anyways, he's in it. He's good. He's good. My one complaint about that, and it's very much a complaint I have with many prequels and sequels, is that he's in the Immortan Joe costume. It's like he went down to Hot Topic or wherever, or maybe he's on Facebook Marketplace, and he ordered a custom Immortan Joe costume. Like, that's what it would look like. Not that there's anything really wrong with that necessarily, I suppose, but I would have known who the character was without that costume. I'm just saying. Yeah, and it's weird. It doesn't track passage of time very well either, because it takes place over like 12 years, I think. And outside of the actresses changing, I think twice, there's no other really way to tell. And that doesn't matter until the end, which they kind of use as this cheap reveal to be like, this is happening at the same time as that stuff you saw on Fury Road. Isn't that cool, dude? Isn't that cool? Whatever. But George Miller's not going to get a chance, probably, to do another one. Apparently, he was going to do a movie called The Wastelands. He was in pre-production on it, I believe. They were on a holding pattern, seeing how this would do. But it was the Wastelands. It was going to bring back Mad Max. He was going to be back in the movie. I don't know if he was going to be a main character, but he was going to be a character there. And it was supposed to take place a year before Fury Road. Because for some reason, we're just very fascinated with the world leading up to Fury Road. I don't know, the Wasteland's a big place. I think, Max could have fucked off somewhere else and found himself in other adventures. I don't know if we just need to return to this spot. Although, and I think we even remarked upon this in our Fury Road review, what the fuck was going on out there? Like, would I want to see, like, wild Tom Hardy with, like, the long hair and the beard and eating lizards and with his fucking cool-ass Mad Max car? Is it The Interceptor, right? Would that be is there a cool movie in there? I'm sure there is. And I guess it maybe would have made more sense because he was like a side character. He would have been like amongst the ensemble. What's actually, speaking of Mad Max, going back to Furiosa for 1 second. It's kind of funny? There's a Mad Max character in this movie. Like, they couldn't even make one of these without just having a Mad Max stand-in. Which is kind of funny. Apparently, Hideo Kojima adores Furiosa. He's a big George Miller fan. I don't know if he's just doing it because he has so much respect for George Miller. And George Miller is in his new game. DS2, dude. Death Stranding 2. Check it. I hope that comes out this year. I don't think it will, though. Anyways. So George Miller's in that game. So I'm sure he's, I don't know how honest he's being, but he says he's seen Furiosa like 4 or 5 times. And that's, he just likes it more every time he sees it. George Miller was out on the red carpet saying, if they make another Mad Max video game, mate, I hope it's directed by Hideo Kojima. He's the only one, mate. He's the only one that's got it. I actually kind of like that. It was Avalanche. Is that the studio that did it? That Mad Max open world game from a few years ago? I actually really enjoy that game. Kind of kicks ass. It's a great game for people with nostalgia. For Mad Max that have a hard time sleeping at night. I was like years and years ago when it first came out, and I would just stay up all night listening to crazy people talk about like flat earth and shit while I played Mad Max. And I think it's one of the few games I've ever actually like taken the time to 100%. I was actually just enjoying the tedium of it so much that I ended up just doing every single thing I could. A lot of fun. If you've never tried it, give it a shot. I think it might be free on PlayStation Plus if you have that. Even if you don't, though, it's worth like the $10 if you can find a used copy of it. Well worth like the $10 it would cost. I can definitely assure you of that. But yeah, well, I guess that was kind of a rambling one. Thanks for keeping me company while I was taking a drive to where I gotta be. Yes, doing some running some errands, had to do some family stuff, hanging out with the kids. So I had to reschedule nightcap and everything. Now I'm out on the road. But you can't stop me from making content, God. You understand? You understand? I'm like Ahab, and you're like Moby Dick. I don't fucking care if you're nonsense. I gotta stop you. And I gotta make this content. None of that made any sense. So I'm just gonna sign off now. I'm almost where I'm supposed to be. But you guys have the best day ever. And yeah, check out Furiosa. Definitely check it out on the big screen if you get a chance to. But even if you don't, it's a fun movie. There was a lot of fun stuff in it. It was way better than I expected it to be. I kind of expected it to be like I expected to be very bored by it, and I wasn't. So there you go. Chris Hemsworth, delivered. Anya Taylor-Joy, delivered. George Miller, delivered. Even when it didn't work. Adios.